So a very different novel than The Piano Teacher, which is about the struggles of a woman in her late 30s living with her mother, um, facing the discrepancy between higher cultural life in Vienna and her lower urges, her sexuality, her inability to communicate with others, and this big gap between the high consciousness of humanity and where the center where all the artistic urges are, and her lower urges, her sexuality, this gap between them, and this gap to be an independent woman when she has this codependency relationship with her mother, and this threat of madness always looming, this madness of her father who's in a mental hospital. It's a psychological novel, and it's the same time it talks about the Austrian psyche in a very deep, deep level. It's a fantastic book. It's very disturbing. Disturbing is not necessarily bad. Then we have Paul Auster, who's not disturbing at all. It's very soothing, very interesting, very, it's like he's a very easygoing, pleasant storyteller, and he speaks about a topic close to his heart. He comes from a family of immigrants, Jewish immigrants from Russia, or Russia area, Belarus. According to family legend, Ferguson's grandfather departed on foot from his native city of Minsk with 100 rubles sewn into the lining of his jacket, traveled west to Hamburg, through Warsaw and Berlin, and then booked passage on a ship called the Empress of China, which crossed the Atlantic in rough winter storms and sailed into New York Harbor on the first day of the 20th century. While waiting to be interviewed by an immigration officer at Ellis Island, he struck up a conversation with a fellow Russian Jew. The man said to him, "Forget the name Reznikov. It won't do any good here. You need an American name for your new life in America. Something with a good American ring to it." Since English was still an alien tongue to Isaac Reznikov in 1900, he asked his older, more experienced compatriot for a suggestion. "Tell him you're Rockefeller," the man said. "You can't go wrong with that." An hour passed, then another hour, and by the time the 19-year-old Reznikov sat down to be questioned by the immigration officer, he had forgotten the name the man had told him to give. "Your name?" the officer asked. Slapping his head in frustration, the weary immigrant blurted out in Yiddish, "Ich hab vergessen. I've forgotten." And so it was that Isaac Reznikov began his new life in America as Ichabod Ferguson. By the way, it's a well-known joke. He's not being original, but I like the way he incorporated a very well-known American Jewish joke into this novel. He had a hard time of it, especially in the beginning. But even after it was no longer the beginning, nothing ever went as he had imagined it would in his adopted country. It was true that he managed to find a wife for himself just after his 26th birthday. And it was also true that this wife, Fanny née Grossman, bore this very thick novel. It's just the beginning, don't worry. How many pages? This is, 1,000, more than 1,000 pages, people. But this will definitely keep you busy. His wife bore him, this is like a folk tale in a way, a family saga. I don't know. It has like elements of a folk tale. His wife bore him 3 robust and healthy sons, but life in America remained a struggle for Ferguson's grandfather from the day he walked off the boat until the night of March 7th, 1923, when he met an early, unexpected death at the age of 42, gunned down in a holdup in the leather goods warehouse in Chicago, where he had been employed as a night watchman. No photographs survive of him, but by all accounts he was a large man with a strong back and enormous hands, uneducated, unskilled, the quints, the quints, the quints, quintessential greenhorn know nothing. On his first afternoon in New York, he chanced upon a street peddler hawking the robust, roundest, most perfect apples he had ever seen. Unable to resist, it bought one and eagerly bit into it. Instead of the sweetness he had been anticipating, the taste was bitter and strange. Even worse, the apple was sickening soft, and once his teeth had pierced the skin, the insides of the fruit came pouring down the front of his coat in a shower of pale red liquid dotted with scores of pellet-like seeds. Such was his first taste of New York, of the New World, his first never-to-be-forgotten encounter with a Jersey tomato. Not a Rockefeller, then, right? But a broad-shouldered, roustabout, a Hebrew giant with an absurd name and a pair of restless feet, who tried his luck in Manhattan and Brooklyn, and Baltimore and Charleston, in Duluth and Chicago, employed variously as a dockhand, an ordinary seaman on a Great Lakes tanker, an animal handler for traveling circus, an assembly line worker in a tin can factory, a truck driver, a ditch digger, a night watchman. For all his efforts, he never earned more than nickels and dimes, and therefore the only things poor Ike Ferguson bequeathed to his wife and 3 boys were the stories he had told them about the vagabond adventures of his youth. In the long run, stories are probably no less valuable than money, but in the short run, they have their decided limitations. The leather goods company made a small settlement with Fanny to compensate her for her loss, and then she left Chicago with the boys, moving to Newark, New Jersey, at the invitation of her husband's relatives, who gave her top-floor apartment in their house in Central Ward for a nominal monthly rent. Her sons were 14, 12, and 9. Louis, the oldest, had long since evolved into Lou. Aaron, the middle child, had taken to calling himself Arnold after one too many schoolyard beatings in Chicago's, and Stanley, the 9-year-old, was commonly known as Sonny. To make ends meet, the mothers took in laundry and mended clothes, but before long the boys were contributing to the household finances as well, each one with an after-school job, each one turning over every penny he earned to his mother. Times were tough, and the threat of destitution filled the rooms of the apartment like a dense, blinding fog. There was no escape from fear, and bit by bit all 3 boys absorbed their mother's dark ontological conclusions about the purpose of life. Either work or starve, either work or lose the roof over your head, either work or die. For the Fergusons, the weak-minded notion of all for one and one for all did not exist. In their little world, it was all for all or nothing. Ferguson was not yet 2 when his grandmother died. Now we come to the character of Ferguson, which meant that he retained no conscious memories of her. But according to the family legend, Fanny was a difficult and erratic woman. So now we see it from the point of view of the grandson born to this immigrant. But according to family legend, Fanny was a difficult and erratic woman, prone to violent screaming fits and manic bursts of uncontrollable sobbing, who beat her boys with brooms whenever she